7. We're recording?
Yep.
Okay. Roll call, please. Can you start, Mr. Blackmer?
Mark Blackmer,
Amy Monahan.
David Morse?
Sid Schleifer, Aaron Farman, John Day,
Dwight?
Dwight Reinowitz. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so, designation of alternates, if we can see all three. John. Yeah, Amy and Dwight. On to the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, I'd like to say, thank everybody for being here and, all the work that gets done. We have meeting minutes from 9/18/2025.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
you just buzzed right past citizens' comments. You may want to just check.
Oh, I did, didn't I? I'm sorry. Do we have citizens' comments on, anything that's not going to be discussed tonight? Okay, hearing none, we'll go on to, meeting minutes. Sorry about that. I used my pen and check those off. Can you put the minutes up on the screen, John,
Sure.
please?
Give me a second.
7 pages.
Have- Oh, anyone want to make a motion to approve minutes?
I'll make the motion to approve. No, I'll make the motion to approve.
second,
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Right.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
me, oh, same.
Mark Blackmer abstained. Okay, on to the new business, the scenic road ordinance discussion with the Conservation Commission, and I see that Gina's here.
I am Jean Pillow and I represent the Woodstock Conservation Commission. And I believe you're all aware of the shortcomings of the scenic road ordinance, whereas there is no penalty for violating the ordinance. And the Conservation Commission Development Review Committee reviewed the issues on Quarry Road. And one of our recommendations was there should be penalties added to the ordinance so that there's something that the town can do if there's another violation of this nature to discourage these types of violations by having a penalty. And so we put that in our report and Chan contacted us to say, draft us for some language and we'll put it up at a town meeting. And I said, wait a minute, this is a planning and zoning thing to enforce, and I can't do this without talking to you first. So here I am.
Okay.
So, Crystal Adams, who's on the Conservation Commission, who also works in the town hall, did some research, and there's a copy of this document over there for all of you. It lists 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 towns that have a scenic road ordinance with a penalty for violation. And amazingly, they all are exactly $100 a day. And until the violation is corrected. And I thought, oh, great, that makes it easy if this is what everybody else is doing. But then something in the back of my mind said, you know, there's got to be state enabling legislation that says what you can do, because you can't make decisions to the town unless the state says it's a legal thing to do. So I Googled it, and I came up with Connecticut General Statutes, section 13A-140, and in there, it covered scenic road ordinance violations, and the municipality by ordinance may establish a civil penalty not more than $1,000 for cutting, removing, damaging, or pruning any tree, shrub, or vegetation in violation in the provisions. And in our town, it's also stone walls. So I also said, wait, I can't say $100 a day because it could easily get up over $1,000. So I have to do some more research on this, but I wanted your input. Is this something the Planning and Zoning Commission would like to see? Would you like to see that there is a penalty? And in my mind, the penalty must be more than $100 permit fee and the $250 special public hearing, fee. So that's $350, and then each abutter on the road has to be notified by certified mail. So the penalty has to be greater than the cost of complying, because then it will encourage people to comply. That's my thought. But in terms of what the penalty should be, how it should be, placed on somebody, how soon does it get placed? Is it immediate? There has to be something in the provision about, challenging the penalty. These are all things that Chan brought up. I was at the Board of Selectmen meeting earlier today, and trying to find my notes, because they wrote on the back, okay. Like, who fixes the violation, and which I think planning and zoning would be the one to fix the violation, because you're the ones that are charged with overseeing the scenic road ordinance.
Gene, I think he meant who physically does the reparations,
Oh,
because he
yeah,
discussed
that's
how if
true.
a homeowner or someone does it, they're not legally insured, so someone else would
That's
should be
correct.
responsible for fixing
He
it.
was at the meeting. So if the town has to do the fixes, and they can't get to it right away, when does the timeline start and end for the penalty phase? So, in this case, there was a wetlands violation as well, because they didn't have any permits to work in the upland review area. And, so there's a couple different things that were fixed to this one. But I'd just like to hear what you think before I start to draft this to propose that go to town meeting.
In the past, we've had violations. We've had people go through the ones on Joy Road, we had the driveway, guy put in a driveway. And he had to go back and still apply and have the public hearing and all that. So I mean, I understand. They still will have to go through the application process and pay all those fees.
Mhm.
So I mean, just to your sake, you want to make it more expensive than not violating, but they still have to pay those fees, even if they violate it, they still have to go back and go through the process.
But
So-
in this case, the violation was so great that.
Yes, I'm not saying this, but I'm saying that I'm not arguing with you.
Right.
I'm saying
Okay.
those fees are still, right, yes, John.
So, Mr. Chair, just to be the stick in the mud, I would just remind the commission that at this time, you have a pending public hearing for activity on a scenic road. I would strongly encourage the commission and the public not to discuss that specific issue, that specific application. Obviously, we talk about scenic roads and previous violations, previous applications, all you want, but I would encourage you not to address the activity that is currently under application for public hearing at this meeting.
Okay. So yes, go ahead, John.
So it strikes me that a daily penalty would be really hard to decide when the beginning and end of it would be. And in a case of somebody doing something to a road that was substantial, why not a one-time penalty of $1,000 or whatever? I just don't see how you would.
It could help them facilitate the speed in which they come to the office, right? Because so you violate, you still have to come and you have to fill out the paperwork and do the stuff. So if you're getting paid by the day, that encourages them to come in sooner. So you could do the violation starts from the notice of violation until you do the application for whatever the next step is.
Right.
And it would just speed up that process.
See what Amy's saying, what we're trying to do is not put the horse in front of the cart. If people are gonna go, oh, wait a minute, let's make sure we go get the permit, so I look to do.
Yes.
Anywhere, any scenic road, or, you know, most things do that, you gotta make.
Any violation.
Not where people talk, it's like, yeah, we don't wanna touch that, that's sacred, any roads in town, and we wanna make sure we go down, see the town, see what we need to do, ask permission, then do it. If you don't, if you make it low enough, why are you gonna do it? You know, so that, like you said, it'll be a fee great enough where, hey, you know what, I'm gonna get educated before I touch something, I wanna come and talk to the zoning, talk to the town, what do I need to do, and have some guidance. That's all we ask any resident of the town to do. If you're not sure.
In the case of a fine, who actually enforces the fine?
I do not know. Do you know that, John? Who would enforce the fine? Would that be would that be you, planning and zoning? Officer?
Yeah, we would ultimately, well, we'd probably have to put something in there about the town's ability to, you know, convert the fine to, you know, a property lien or something like that. But generally speaking, on municipal zoning fines, without a fee, without a citation ordinance, it basically needs to be demanded through court. So we may want to take a look at that element of this, how the fines get paid and what happens upon non-payment. I think that's an important consideration.
Sid, you had something?
Do you know whether the penalties or fines are either or, $100 per day or 1,000, or can it be both?
Up to a maximum of a,
I can,
Or can there be
Every
an
day costs.
upfront, say, up to $1,000 and a daily fee of some other?
Well,
that's a question that you have to research.
I mean, it would be not the 1,000 and then 100 after that, but it could be
Yeah.
$100 a day with a maximum of $1,000.
And I think there are different, like if it's essentially couched and treated like a zoning violation, which does have that $100. And I think they were talking about going up to 250 in some recent legislation. That's essentially using the zoning violation language on zoning violation. And so that can keep accumulating. I think if you're relying exclusively on the language of the scenic road ordinance statute, that just might be the $1,000 and cannot exceed, but we would probably want our attorney's opinion on, you know, can we sort of borrow from essentially zoning enforcement language so that there is not the same hard cap.
I think two ways of that is especially if you have multiple violations as you go. Because one scenic road might have multiple different violations in the language. Yeah.
Just one second, Brian. Aaron?
So I'm on board with having, you know, some kind of penalty for the scenic road ordinance. I live on Joy Road. I've seen multiple people violate it, who, at least one person who knew it was a scenic road and just did it anyway. And yeah, for somebody to violate and then just come in and fill out the paperwork and pay the fee is, yeah, not deterring anybody from doing whatever they want without coming in here. So I think, yeah, the fine has to be enough to deter somebody from doing whatever they want first and coming back and asking for forgiveness, because that's not helping anybody. My only issue with the fine is probably gonna be somebody's cutting down multiple trees. You can't replace trees very easily. I feel like the penalty for trees should be higher or more than any of the other things, because somebody, you know, cuts a driveway into their property, that's fine. They didn't read the ordinance, whatever. Have a flat fine for that makes sense. Or fine it per day, that's fine, whatever, but you can't easily replace trees or shrubbery or some other stuff. I feel like there has to be like a tier maybe or different fines for different violations within the ordinance. So that it makes sense for, you know, if somebody cuts trees down, that's a severe, I feel like that's a severe offense. That you should have read and understood the ordinance before you did something.
well, the scenic road ordinance protects trees, I think 18 inches diameter and greater. It doesn't protect small trees. And I don't know, it's a whole nother issue of, you know, paying a fine and then getting a permit, but the condition of approval of the permit could be to replant trees that were removed from the road. That could be a condition of approval, but that's down the road.
But still, somebody cuts down a 100-year-old tree. You
Yeah.
can't replace that.
No,
very
you
easily,
can't.
Like, it's,
That's the sad part.
yeah.
Did you have any sense whether or not, this state statute, prohibited, asking for restitution as opposed to a penalty?
I just read
Yeah.
what I downloaded and I haven't, you know, this was something that just came up like on our conservation committee
You can see the-
last week. And I came up, it was just 2 days ago, I thought, wait, what's the state enabling legislation, the legislation that's on there, and I saw it, I was like, oh, it's not gonna be as easy as, here's some examples, let's do this. So,
I mean, I agree with Aaron, and it would seem to me that, you know, if you get a $200 fine, cut down a pile of really nice trees, somehow there should be some effort to, on the part of the person who did it, to make restitution.
I totally agree with you, the restitution, but the fine is important, because the restitution is, think about it, being
Yeah.
a farmer. I come down, I lay these trees down, I put those shrubs there, I pick trees up, I got what I wanted.
Yeah.
So I gotta be careful with that, cause me, like you said, I hate, like you said, the trees are protected and the road, you know, all the scenic roads, so, you know. Gotta be careful, the restitution is a given, but.
Yeah.
Gotta be careful.
Brian, just a reminder to be careful. You are involved in a public hearing coming up, so I just don't. Be careful how we can't discuss anything.
We were,
I can mention the fact that one main person that's talking over there. A month ago, I can actually give you the date, was cutting a tree up across the road. He has no rights doing that. He should have had the town over there to do it. Town
We're not,
involved.
we're not.
All right, if you have a complaint about a specific property, please direct that to the zoning enforcement officer.
Go and make
Fine,
complaint to the zoning
fine,
enforcement. We're not
fine,
playing that game.
Fine. That's fine.
If you have a complaint, make it to the zoning enforcement
Yeah.
officer.
Yeah,
This is not the place for that.
very good.
Okay, back to the Conservation Commission. So do you want to work on continuing doing your work on drawing something up? I think you have support from us.
okay,
We got
that's what I
that. I
want.
mean, is that general? Do we need should we have a vote on that, or should we just have a?
Might as well, it's not gonna hurt.
You could,
We have a
yeah, you
vote?
could ask someone to support Gene's, you know, to draft, say that Planning and Zoning Commission supports Gene's drafting of a amendment to the ordinance.
So
We have a, it's it moved.
Second.
I'm sorry.
Sid and John.
Sid and John, to support the Conservation Commission's drawing up the plan for penalties for scenic road. Any more discussion on that? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'd like
You all
to
right?
abstain.
Wait, you abstain, okay. Anything else we need to do with that for Jean?
No, I will continue to work on drafting it and I'll consult with some of the other towns. To see how they came up with what they came up with, but I'll try to follow up more on that state statute specifically. And then the town attorney, I was always hoping Chan, that the town attorney will actually review that to make sure
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, we have to
appropriate,
run
but I
that
would
stuff by him.
also share it with you as things develop.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Aaron?
Gene, if you talk to other towns who have some of these penalties, ask if they've ever had to enforce them and what like the process is.
Okay.
Have they actually, has anybody actually enforced this? Because I don't know, fees of $100 a day, I feel like some of these towns probably have never enforced it. So I'm just curious what their experience is, if they've had violations and they've actually fined somebody, how that process was.
I will, it shouldn't be too difficult, as long as my trying to sleep slow.
Yeah, Gene, I'm friendly with the planners in Tolland and Mansfield. I could ask those folks if you'd like.
That would be very helpful, John. I appreciate any help.
Have you ever run into that before, John, yourself?
About
And you're-
payment, no, the Woodstock has been the only town I've ever worked with that had a scenic road ordinance.
Okay, just curious what your experience was.
Yeah.
Okay, now we go on to, we finished with this. We'll go on to old business, the multifamily regulations, continued discussions.
Okay, so if I might, Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, John. Yeah, this
Okay,
is- this
so
is-
I distributed this, I put this on the screen. This is basically based on our last couple of planning and zoning meetings worth of conversation around multifamily. The last meeting's discussion I thought was very, very good. And what I wanted to take away from that, which included a lot of conversation about some of the existing multifamily developments in town, what some of their development density was, what they look like, where their location is. And we had a lot of I think positive discussion about things that we liked or things that we were willing to see. So I wanted to try to move the conversation forward and put this into a framework for discussion that we could then, in theory, turn into a set of regulations, as assuming we're in general agreement with the approach. So starting with the consensus principles, these are the things that I heard, I think, general agreement on from the members of the Planning and Zoning Commission that contributed to the discussion. And it's basically that there's something of a bifurcation. Like if it's small, limited, if we're just talking about a couple of units, it should be relatively easy. It shouldn't be hard to do a 2-family, a 3-family. You know, you don't need 10 acres for that. And you don't need a huge special permit process for that. If you're going larger, then there should be a lot more consideration of what its visual and size impact is on the community, and therefore visibility and screening is a very important thing. I think everyone really seemed to like Woodstock Meadows, which again is a large number of units. That's 50 something units on not that big a property, 20 something acres, but it really can't be seen from the road in any kind of way. And so the screening of that, the fact that it's existing essentially in the middle of a clearing in the woods, is a big selling feature of the benefits of that. So screening is critical. There isn't any magic necessarily in picking a density number, right? Because the current multifamily density allowance is 1 per acre, which is, I think, the economics of that is difficult, and it's probably why the town hasn't had many or even any multifamily developments in the last 15, 20, 25 years. So density isn't necessarily the most important thing, and it could easily exceed 2 to 3 units to the acre, which again, looking at the developed portion of Cornfield Point and Essex Meadows, those are both well north of 2 units to the acre. And so, how do you determine what that is? Well, you don't necessarily have to pick a number of what that density should be, but rather the soil conditions, because again, other than the very limited, very, very limited area of sewer service in Woodstock, we're basically on private septic systems. And so we're dealing with soil constraints. And so if you have great soils, which a couple of people that talked to me about Woodstock Meadows told me that it's just an amazing, sand and gravel soils. And so it was perfect septic circumstances that doesn't necessarily exist elsewhere in town. If you've got perfect septic system soils, let's use them. Let's build more units. If you don't, well, then obviously you should be restricted. And so the health district is really the public health code is really more of the determining factor for soil conditions or for density. The other more significant factor when looking at how we should regulate these is traffic. And Doug Porter, who I don't think is there this evening, made the point that it's a lot easier for our state highways and major collector roads to absorb the traffic flow that might come from a higher density residential area, as opposed to, you know, some of our scenic roads, some of our dirt roads, some of our just very small rural roads. And so perhaps, you know, larger developments could be directed or could be easier to do along major roadways rather than the smaller roads. So things that are more visible, again, there is the sensitivity to how things look, and you know, we don't necessarily want, you know, a high-rise housing tower. We don't necessarily want something, you know, that's sort of architecturally out of step with the type of scenic roadway that we like to promote in Woodstock. And so there could be some architectural guidance, not necessarily design things for it, but add some suggestions about, you know, colonial architecture or certain, you know, siding treatments and things like that to just nod to the architectural context here. And then finally, part of the reason we want to look at increasing housing opportunity is affordability. And so should there be some consideration for an affordable set aside in an analogous way to our subdivision regulations? We require open space be set aside as part of, you know, most larger subdivisions. With more larger housing developments, should we mandate and some affordability? And I heard some consensus around the idea that affordability should be a consideration. So I'll stop talking for a second there and ask for any feedback on these consensus principles. If anyone sort of disagrees with how I'm phrasing that, or disagrees with one of these principles.
Seems to be pretty good condensation of what we talked about at our last meeting. Does
Yeah,
anybody
it
else?
sounds good to me.
I mean, that's pretty much, yes, Sid?
Thanks very much, John. This is a, you know, a great starting point. It will generate a lot of good ideas. You mentioned a few times the state highways. You also mentioned another phrase.
Collector roads? Major collector roads.
Collector roads, yeah, that's right. Are they mapped, or do we know which ones those
Yeah.
are? Just to get a visual about which roads we're talking about?
Sure, I should have done that. Let me, I'm going to stop sharing. I can pull that up pretty quickly. But yeah, there aren't many in Woods. I think pretty much the state highways are the only major roadways in Woodstock. I think there are maybe a couple of collector. I think like
County roads a collector, minor
County Road,
rural collector road.
maybe Quasit, you know, that connects Pomfret and Woodstock might be a collector. There's a few, but not many. I'll see if I can pull that up.
And while we're doing that, I just may have mentioned before, I guess my concern with focusing on the state highways, whether it's commercial, mixed, multifamily, is that we're gonna start to see this strip development along these roads. And then I think I mentioned like Route 44, Putnam, east of the 295 exchange, where it's chain stores, lots of parking lots, and kind of that creeping development. I don't have an answer or suggestion, just I'm concerned about the state roads and what they might turn into if we do focus a lot of our development related attention to them. Another way to look at it is, you know, these state highways are the major corridors. That's what most people drive. That's where we're gonna have the greatest visual impact. So if we do decide to favor state highways, maybe a pretty significant roadside buffer would be appropriate.
Yeah, I think I have some more nuanced thought about some of that also, but I wanted to reflect the discussion. Because I think there is value, assuming it's not an overly large development where you literally have hundreds and hundreds of units. There's a lot of value in tucking some of these places away and in you know, scattering them around town a little bit more. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. So. And I have the base map. I'm a little confused because Dwight, my recollection was similar to yours. I had thought that we had a couple more collector roads in town. So here's the where's my legend? Here's the legend. So here's Woodstock. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. And really the only nuance is these are the state highways. I have the, well, I'm not seeing any of these. But we have the legend, which there's interstates, there's other freeways, minor collector, minor arterial, but I'm not actually seeing it showing up on the map. So there's maybe something I'm just not turning on properly. So I apologize. Let's see. Functional class active.
I know years ago we got a grant through NECOG to do a section of county road because it was a minor rural collector road. And
Yeah.
I think you might be right on Quasit also.
Turn all layers on.
Main district is a major.
John, try zooming in a little bit, see if they show up, because you're not.
Oh, there we go. Yep, thank you. Good call. All right, so we'll kind of pan around town a little bit. So yeah, so this is Quasit Road, is a collector, is a major collector. This Trip Road, actually. Let's see where else. Yeah, as Dwight suggested, this is County Road right here. That might be it. I don't know. Well, no, that picks up in Eastford. That's what is that? Perrin Road that comes into Eastford. But it's
Yes.
not.
Cemetery Road gets a lot of traffic, a lot of through traffic. People
Yeah.
going to east, going through to.
What about Eastward Stock?
It's can over that way. No.
Dug Hill Road gets a lot of through traffic.
Right. And so this is something that maybe we want to consider. This is an entirely different discussion, but I'm actually there are state transportation grants called LOTSIP, which is Local Transportation Capital Improvements Program. Those those funds are only available on major roadways and major collectors. And I'm actually, so if you wanted to do some roadway improvements on a road, let's say, Payne District or something like that, that isn't appropriately classified, it's ineligible. But there is a process to get them reclassified. And I'm actually going through this right now in the town of Columbia, because we basically need to redo a road and drainage, and it's a popular cut through road, but it is not classified as a collector. So we're seeking to reclassify it so it becomes eligible for grants. So that may be something, and Amy, you can take a note on this also, something we want to look at for the plan of conservation and development to look at maybe reclassifying certain roads so they be eligible for more funding.
Do you know when that was last updated?
Yes, it was updated in July of 2024.
What is the definition of the collectors? That is it, what the roads that you have listed, they're pretty much going from one state highway.
Yes,
to another
that's
state highway. Okay.
that is one of the most significant things is connecting two state highways, particularly because those roads get significantly used when there are detours off of state highways. There is a minimum daily traffic count threshold. It's not a very high threshold. It's only about 500 or 600 cars per day. But so there are a couple of these objective thresholds, as you suggest. But at any rate, yeah. So that, Sid, I think your larger point is well taken. That maybe this is something. And again, it's sort of a question of sliding scale. Do we want where do we want to direct our largest units, our largest developments, as we might define them, versus is it appropriate to, is it a big deal to put 12 to 16 units off of Dug Hill Road or something like that, as opposed to 197? So anyway, okay. So thank you. Other thoughts about the broad principles?
Brian?
The one collector road, I don't think you mentioned,
Say your name, please, so we know.
Brian Sheldon. The one collector road you didn't mention was the one on East Woodstock from 169 to Dug Hill. That was an old state highway. And that would all, obviously be considered, I would think, a collector road.
I'm sorry, East Woodstock, where?
Top Road.
It goes from 169 to Dug Hill, and that's why Dug Hill is so big at the bottom, because the state highway used to turn around there and plow back.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, so
And
that could be one for reconsideration of classification, yeah.
Yeah, well, they switched that out with 197, because 197 was a town road. And so they gave that to the state and they gave that to the town, the East Woodstock branch.
Okay,
So that's, so, most people wouldn't know that unless you've been here forever. David, you must remember
Yeah, I
that.
remember that.
Yeah. But at the same time, John, being you're talking about this housing, I mentioned it to you, during the week. A lot of these guys don't know, but Cornfield Point, when they built it, I was part of that. I was part of Woodstock Meadows, so I'm very familiar with both of them. Cornfield Point, they didn't continue in further, mainly because of, you guys wouldn't even know, but Putnam Fish and Game, they used to shoot outside all the time. That's no longer the case. It's an inside shooting. So you could actually extend Cornfield Point quite a bit, I think, almost double it if you really look at it. But again, John would have to look at it, and he could pull a map up and you can see he did it before at the last meeting. There's a lot of acreage behind there. That's only because Tom didn't want the shooting to bother the elderly. But now there's no shooting, it's inside.
It's outside as well.
It is outside.
Outdoor ranges.
Yeah, but it's towards the Little Pond Road where they put the pond in where they used to shoot. And they got the barbecue pit over so it's no longer shooting where it used to be. So it's all on Little Pond roadside outside. And the remainder to the north would be Cornfield Point, and there's really very little shooting. So it's something to look at because that ground is super duper for septic. And you could probably, I think there's 37 units here?
At Cornfield or at, what's that?
Yeah, Cornfield.
Yeah, I think that's about right. It's in the 30s.
Yeah, 37, I think. And you could literally put, without a doubt, 20 to 25 more right there. And the extension, if you go in there and you guys go to the right and you go all the way to the end, there's an extension to go right down in where I'm talking about. And it would just make perfect sense just to add right to what you have, and you'd have an instant relief for the town.
Yeah, but we're just making regulations. That's all privately done, and that's not even elderly housing. That's just general. That's not elderly, that's just housing. That's.
But I thought that was mostly people that were retired and.
Well, I think that's just how it happened.
Well, how it worked out. And we can't, I don't know who owns that property, but we can't say, oh.
No, I'm just mentioning the fact that you guys said you're looking for areas, and it's an area that you could, ask about.
I know, but our role is just to make regulations, making it easier for people to do this. We can't designate a spot, and say, somebody put it here.
Yeah.
We're discussing what, if it's a town road, a larger road, state highway, we're not pinpointing the exact location of it.
So you're still looking for areas,
We aren't looking for
We're not,
areas. We're
no.
just trying to make regulations so people can,
find them,
if somebody wants to do it, that they could do it,
yeah,
make it possible.
yeah,
That's not in our realm of responsibility at all. So
right.
we make the regulations. So can we move on to this potential framework that you have up now, please, John?
Sure. So again, and obviously there are certain things that we can talk about, particularly relative to state highways and other roads. But so based on those principles, which I think again are broadly, sort of agreed to, they make some sense to most of you, would be to look at splitting your zoning regulations for multifamily into a couple of different categories, basically sort of minor and major. So you had done this a couple of years ago with your subdivisions and kind of loosened some of the requirements on minor subdivisions. So the idea being what we would call traditional sort of missing middle housing, which is sort of 2 to 4 units. Some definitions of missing middle might go up to even 5, 6, 8 units, but you're basically smaller developments that aren't going to have a lot of impact in any way, not visually, not traffic wise, not wastewater, not, school populations, whatever, relatively low impact, should be pretty easy, should be almost as easy to do as a single family residence with an accessory apartment, which is something that anyone can do as of right. You basically can do 2 units right now, as long as one is little and one is larger. But so the idea is, if you're in one of these larger, more populated roadways, you can do one of these you could do one of these projects essentially as of right, not through a special permit. Basically, just get your get your septic system approval, make sure that you're out of any wetlands areas, and then pull your permits. So again, health department and those things are pretty critical. But the idea would be then to just kind of loosen it up, and we would have to talk a little bit more if this is something that would be appropriate in more areas in town, if we don't necessarily want to limit these to higher traffic areas, and prefer, maybe as Sid was suggesting, that it could be scattered more widely around town. But this is sort of the first big step that you as a commission philosophically would be taking, is to basically loosen up the regulations so that someone could do 2 units, 3 units, 4 units. As of right, you guys in planning and zoning would never really have a say other than framing the regulations. So that's a question of sort of control and oversight versus the need for more housing. So that's number one. And then looking at smaller lots. So again, your current regulations place a minimum threshold of 10 acres. If you are less than 10 acres, you could do a slightly higher density. So we're looking at maybe, depending on the size of it, it could be, 2, 3, 4 units per acre, depending on the size of the lot, and also depending on soil conditions. And again, these numbers are just placeholders for discussion. But the idea is, okay, let's say you've got a 6-acre lot. You could do up to, 18 to 24 units, which is 3 to 4 units per acre, assuming that your soil conditions are all right, with a special permit. And we would want to look at those issues of impact that we had talked about. So visual impact of something a little bit larger, 15, 20, 25 units, would need to have some visual buffers. And that buffering width would depend, I think, pretty significantly on the size of the development and the size of the parcel. What we saw in Essex Meadows, again, which is maybe an unrealistically ideal test case. It has, just by nature of the property, something like 200 linear feet of width of buffer area from any of the neighbors, which is very wide. You could certainly get decent buffering on a narrower strip than that. But I do think the critical visual separation from the road and from the neighbors is something that this commission definitely thought was important. So wanting to build in some buffer there. And so again, I put in a minimum of 50 around the perimeter, because I think that is doable on lots of larger than a few acres. You can usually find that sort of distance. And then again, we would want to have that discussion about, would we want to direct these to those more heavily trafficked parts of town versus finding some place to tuck it in, down Brockway or Hawkins, or up off of English Neighborhood or something like that. And then if you've got, so that's the sort of the smaller scale stuff. Larger scale, you're looking at more than 10 acres. My proposal there, again, because we don't necessarily know nor care what the actual density inside a development is, as long as it complies with health code, and as long as we largely can't see what's going on in there. So if you have a bigger property, the idea would be to take the arbitrary cap off of density and just let the soil conditions and the buffering dictate the style and density of what happens inside the development. Because again, I think what I was hearing last time is, again, if we don't see it, if there's that one, a couple of those that are off of Trip Road or Underwood Road, where they're sort of well set back, and most people have absolutely no idea how many units there are back there because you never see them, you never hear about them. It's out of sight. And so why are we worrying about density if there is really no impact on the neighborhood or on the town? So again, obviously substantial screening, you can still do a special permit, but allow some flexibility of design. And then to that end, the next bullet down is exactly what the development would look like. Again, if it is not impacting our visual experience of the road, driving around, walking around, biking around town, you can't see something. It doesn't really matter if it's townhouses, if it's, that there's a brick 4-family right in South Woodstock there, right near the fairgrounds, up 169, near the ball fields. It doesn't matter if it's that or the townhouses that are up 169 in North Woodstock. If you can't see it, why are we worried too much about whether it's 4 units in a brick building or eight townhouses in a row? It's really, leave it to the designer and builder to kind of figure out what the market is for that property. So it could be little tiny houses in a cluster. It could be a single building with 30 units and that sort of thing. So again, those last 2 bullets are really about letting the designer and the developer figure out what works for that site and for his or her market. That said, I would suggest, if you're opening up the door to much broader multifamily development, you want to consider the need for affordable housing in town. And so, similar to setting aside open space, as I said, the idea here would be to start requiring developments. And again, these are somewhat arbitrary numbers, but sort of easy round numbers to understand. Would be to set aside 20% of your units, again, over 10. So if you're just doing a duplex, you don't necessarily have to encumber one of the units. But if you're doing 10 or more units, for instance, 20% of them would have to be set aside. And I'm basically tagging this to the state's incentive housing program, which establishes a 20% set aside affordable at 80% of the area median income, which I can look up what Woodstock's is. My knee-jerk reaction, I think, is our area median income is in the realm of $80,000 to $90,000. And so that the 80%, let's pick the number $90,000 as our median income. 80% of that would be what, $72,000 a year. And then the math from that point would be you wouldn't be able to spend more than 30% of your income on housing over the course of the year. So it would be 30% of that 72,000. The math is easy there. That's $24,000. And then divided by 12 months a year, you're working with basically a housing budget, an all-in housing budget of $2,000 a month. So that's rent or mortgage, insurance, utilities, and that sort of thing. That would be the affordability budget.
Do you want those exact numbers, John?
I'm sorry, say it again.
You want the exact numbers? I have them right here.
Oh, you have? Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
So one person is 78.6, a 4-person family is 112.4.
Is that the 80%?
That's the area mean income.
Oh, that's the area mean. Okay.
Area mean income for Woodstock. One person 78,680 and 4-person family 112,400.
Okay.
So the 80% AMI, the low income for one person is 62,944. For 2 people is 71,936, and for 4-person is 89,920.
So I was in the ballpark there. And so that's roughly what we'd be talking about for those rents. So it's in many cases in a market like Woodstock, restricting something at the 80% area median income actually doesn't change rents much at all, because the market-based rent is generally about that limit. So it's not particularly, in most cases, it's not particularly a hardship on the developer to have to lock, 20% of his or her rents down at the 80% AMI, because that's basically what they're charging for apartments anyway. Again, the requirement would be, you want to build in Woodstock, you got to make sure some of these are set aside to give people opportunity. And then the last thought was, again, a little bit concerning the visual impact. We don't necessarily have to say, listen, everything needs to be, Regency period architecture or colonial or salt box in it, but to provide some visual guidance and visual context, so that some colonials and federals and the wood siding or concrete wood side, like a hardy plank type siding, so that there is some nod to the architectural context. That would be appropriate, and just make sure that people are nodding to the fact that they're building in Woodstock and not the Hollywood Hills or something like that. So that's the broad framework. And again, I made some, assumptions and some, sort of hit some arbitrary thresholds here to start the discussion. But Mr. Chairman, I'll stop there and see if you want to get any reaction to that framework.
Yeah, that it's very interesting. It's a lot of information there. Do we have any input, John?
So I think the framework sounds great. One question I had as I was listening to this, in the context of trying to attract developers to build multifamily housing, would it not also make sense to make it less attractive to do subdivisions? In other words, are we dealing with the same contractors who will do multifamily versus subdivisions? The idea is to have it more attractive for people to come in here and want to do multifamily housing. But if they still can divide up a piece of land and do a whole bunch of SFDs, then and they make a whole lot more money than doing this, then that's not going to work out well for this. So I guess,
well,
I'm wondering if a companion piece would be to make it harder to do SFD subdivisions.
That's interesting concept. I hadn't thought of that.
Well, you
Make
can't
it more difficult to do a large subdivision rather than, certainly don't want to limit people from building.
well, so what this would do, it somewhat naturally. So if you do have someone that would, take advantage and has a large piece of property, and again, so the current subdivision density is 2.5 acres per house. With if you assume accessory dwelling units, you assume everyone's going to do an accessory dwelling unit, the density gets a little higher. It's obviously 1.25 to 1.5 units per acre. But if you're looking at something like this, if someone has a big piece of property, let's just say 10 acres, right? 10 acres under subdivision, you could get at most 4 units. And those 4 units could have at most, 4 major houses and 4 accessory apartments. So on that 10 acres, you could have a possible total of 8 dwelling units. This regulation, and again, and particularly with the idea of multifamily flexible design, you could do, if you have 10 acres, you could do 40 tiny houses. I would think very, very easily. You wouldn't subdivide it. They would all be on the same property. And so they'd either be like condos or apartments, or either rental or ownership, and people would have, it'd be a common interest community. But, you know, I think the economic incentives would be already there. You know, so do you want, you know, 4 houses with 4 ADUs, or do you want 40 tiny houses on the same 10-acre parcel? And again, this is theoretical, but I don't necessarily think you need to do too much to discourage, you know, single family subdivision, because Woodstock is pretty conservative already.
Okay,
Aaron?
I think the issue now is that our multifamily regulations, nobody can do it, can't meet what we have written, you can't even do. So if we change it to this where people can actually do it, then they're gonna look at it and be like, oh, I can actually come to town and I can actually build a multifamily, you know, on a property. Whereas right now, they come and look at regulations and like, nobody can do that. There's no, they can't make it worthwhile to build right now. So if we change the regulations and allow them to build, they should just come and do it if that's what they want to do, you know what I mean?
no, I understand. I just wanted to make sure that the economic incentive for doing single family houses was not much greater than this. And John correctly or carefully explained that actually on a given piece of property, you'd be able to make more money as a developer doing this as opposed to single family detached houses.
John, one question for you, and then I'll be done. If you have perfect soils, what's like a maximum density, like units per acre that you could get based on a like really good soil?
It can be pretty high. And I mean, well, an example that I used is in Essex, and I could maybe share this. It's a slightly imperfect example because Essex has some areas of public water, but it does have perfect soils in certain areas. So there's a development, and I'm gonna show you it, called Essex Station. If anyone's ever been to the Essex steam train, it's literally right next door to the Essex steam train. It was kind of a perfect storm of things. There were 3 separate parcels that were all right together that were about 3 acres total. And here, I'm going to zoom in just so you can see this. So this is Essex to orient. This is Route 9 coming up from Old Saybrook. Here's the Essex steam train. So this is Plains Road, State Route 153. This development right here, can you guys see that?
Yes.
3 buildings. As it happened, there were each for septic purposes, for septic flow purposes, they all are on their own parcel. So they're not enough flow to trigger a DEP review, which was part of, was like miracle number 1, that we have 3 little parcels. But this is a total of 52 apartment units across 3 buildings on 3 acres. So you are talking in excess of 17 units per acre on this property. Again, you have public water, and so you don't have the concern of a large draw well with a separation distance. I still think something like this would have been possible even if they needed a private well, but in this case it didn't happen to need a private well. But this happened in the last 6 or 7 years. So you've got basically functionally 17 units per acre and it's built on a sandbox. So this is what could happen.
John, can you show the building you showed to the POCD from, what was it, Tallinn or Burnham earlier?
Oh yeah, sure.
Because that one is not on water or septic, correct?
Right, correct. So yeah, in the POCD meeting, we were just talking about some different types of housing. And I'd asked if anyone was aware of, I think it was called Winding River Village in Tallinn, on Tallinn Stage Road, which is Route 74. And okay, here I'll. Okay, so just orienting us, here's I-84. Woodstock is up to the northeast. Here's this is exit 69 in West Willington. So if you followed Tolland Stage Road from Route 169 or from I-84, you can see. So again, it's a state highway. This is Route 74 in many ways is very similar to like 171 in Woodstock in terms of its development density and character. About halfway in, there is basically a senior development called Winding River Village. And so you look up and down the road here, this is very, very Woodstock in terms of its development and woodsiness and feel. So right in here is basically a 2.5-story senior complex. It's a single building. It's got 31 senior apartments in it, essentially. And so this is to a certain extent what I'm talking about in terms of, if you were going to add some architectural design characteristics, it's basically siding. I'm sure it's hardy plank, so it's a siding appearance. But gabled roofs with a couple of dormers, and then backing out just for the overhead view. As again, it's a building with an L, little parking. Again, it's seniors, and I think so the parking demand is a little bit less. There's probably 50 or 60 parking spots here. They're probably talking maybe 2 per unit. And then it's just tucked in here with a slightly longer driveway off of a rural state highway. And my sense is, Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, but the POCD folks thought that, hey, yeah, that could pretty easily work in Woodstock.
Our biggest argument is usually septic and water, right? So that one's on without septic and water. So that kind of nixes that if you have the right parcel. It's all that big if. I thought looking down the road, it's a driveway in, it wasn't like super obtrusive, you know what I mean? Like it's a conversation you guys can have, but we didn't find it as something that was, I don't want that in my town. When you weigh the benefits of the housing availability, especially that one being senior, even if it wasn't what you're getting for that area, and you still have all the trees, it's just that one way in, it doesn't look.
It's the town running water system.
Hmm?
The town ESA for town, they running their water system.
It's not on a water.
It's on a private community well and
Oh.
septic system.
Yeah, so somebody's running it, somebody's doing the samples and things
Right.
like that. But
We have,
if the town is doing it.
I don't know.
Okay. That's a lot of great information. Something I should have brought up before we started this conversation was that, you sent me this little, like chart, decision-making circle, just that I thought everybody has one. That I thought was good just to help us through this whole decision-making process. And it just kind of a reminder to help us guide us through this process and, help keep us focused. I don't know if you see the little circle thing, so we've kind of identified the problem, we're establishing criteria, and, we're kind of at 3 and we're kind of on the right-hand side of the circle right now, coming around to figure this out, just kind of help us through this process. So I just kind of keep it in the back of our mind. Thank you very much for sending that.
I'm visual, can't help it.
No, I mean, that works well for me too. From here, I guess we need to probably, yes, Sid, go ahead.
Sorry, before you do that, I just have a question for John.
Oh, yeah, no,
John, on your first bullet, I mentioned
Yeah.
for state, 2 to 4 units allowed as of right. So, I don't know, I kind of think of the commission as going through a learning curve with these.
Yeah.
This multifamily housing, I think we're gonna get to the point where there's some consensus, we agree on the regulations, without being heavy-handed or overboard. And at that point, I guess we have a decision to make. Thinking that we're still gonna go through a learning curve as these things get approved. One side of me says, I'm not crazy about as of right, because it's just nice to have some applications before us, see how these things work out, see what the issues are, see what goes well, what we might have to tweak. Yet I don't want to burden the developer with a public hearing or multiple appearances before us. If we do require that, if there is no as of right. Your experience with other towns that have kind of taken this leap of faith, gone with as of right, have they regretted that, or have they been happy with how things
Yeah.
have gone without their oversight?
To a certain extent, it's maybe too early to say. I've had a number of towns go as far as duplexes as of right. And for instance, in Hampton, actually, it has always been duplexes as of right. That was part of their original zoning regulation. And I don't think they've regretted it. The thing to realize is, again, taking the cap off the bottle in terms of control of housing regulation doesn't change the town overnight. The pace of growth in Connecticut, particularly in Windham County, is still pretty slow. So change is not going to happen quickly. And so I would say, in answer to your last question, Sid, I haven't gotten a lot of, oh my God, what have we done pushback. But
Good.
That's just because development happens slowly in these places. But yeah, I don't know if I said it. That's a big philosophical step for this commission to take. I don't take that lightly.
Thanks.
Amy,
How, can you just briefly touch upon how these regulations would affect, transitioning existing buildings that might be a larger
Yeah.
farmhouse or a larger building into a multifamily home? Because right now they cannot do that. So part of, this housing crisis is we have several large buildings that could be used differently. And I know some of them that are now single families, when I was a kid, had apartments in them. So that allows these existing buildings to transition into more housing also, correct?
Yeah, well, so actually, that's a good question, and this came up during our POCD discussion that I think I hadn't really considered, which is kind of an extra step here somewhere, or that maybe some nuance in this first idea. But being able, instead of thinking about people building something brand new and controlling the architectural design of it and that sort of thing, we have a large number of large houses in town that do not hold big families the way they might have in the past, right? You've got 3, 4, 5, 6,000 square foot houses that might have a couple of people in them at this point, because our household sizes are getting smaller, particularly our older housing stock. So the idea that I think Amy is referencing is, could you allow for the conversion? And Sid, this actually might be an interesting sort of middle ground for that density discussion, or that duplex discussion or missing middle discussion, is to basically say, we've got this big old house that might be historic, might just be, big, that we can't take care of anymore. And it could very easily support multiple units, so instead of one family in a four bedroom single family house, you'd have two families with two bedroom apartments in the exact same square footage, with no change to the streetscape, no change to traffic patterns, no change to virtually anything other than another family's opportunity to live in Woodstock. So the idea would be allowing, in addition to these as of right construction projects, to allow for as of right conversion of larger houses, perhaps at a certain density, factor. So you maybe a minimum of 600 square feet per unit or something like that so say you've got, a 2,400 square foot existing house that could be carved up into no more than 4 units, for instance, with a couple of caveats that, again, you want to
Depend
preserve.
on septic.
Right.
Correct.
Again, assuming the septic system was sufficient. Or you could, you had room on the property to expand the septic system to handle the flow. But, again, what's the difference between a septic system for 2 2-bedroom apartments in one building versus 1 4-family house? There is no difference. That's a 600 gallons per day septic system. In either case. So again, yeah, health department would have to sign off on these things, but the idea would be, let's not stop people from converting a big old house that they don't need into a couple of apartments that people do need. So it's, if we're going to sort of take the next step in this framework, that would be something that I would want to add some nuance on as well. That answer your question, Amy?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good point. And
I have one more point to make if you will entertain, and I brought this up earlier too, it's just, I get kind of stuck on why we can have student housing. You know what I mean, like rent by the room type of thing in a student housing, when the academy had all those homes and they had the parents and like East Dorm kids. But if that was allowed and it worked and it was livable with that number of people in a home, why can't we have, legally consenting adults that are willing to rent a room do that same type of philosophy? It's just a thought, you know what I mean? You have young people that have a job somewhere, they want to live close to their parents in town, but they don't want to live with their parents, they don't have enough money to rent an apartment. But if there were rooms available, per se, I don't know if anyone would do it, but why is student housing allowed and not communal housing?
is it not allowed?
I don't know. But it's not something that is ever discussed or.
Yeah. It's not a category. I mean, I think it's probably the regulations are probably silent on this. If it's not student housing, this would be something we'd probably classify as SRO, right? Single room occupancy type housing, where you might have common kitchen facilities. Amy, is that sort of what you're envisioning?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it happens in college towns, you know what I mean? A whole
Right.
bunch of kids, they rent a room, they bust it up. But I mean,
Yeah.
that idea of people struggling for housing, you know what I mean? There are plenty of people who are one step away from homelessness. And if you're saying, oh, maybe renting a room gets you back on your feet, you know what I mean? I'm just saying lots of reasons why you could, and it's just something that's never been discussed and it's not allowed in our regulations because we never discuss it. So I just wanted to bring it up.
So that, I mean, I think that's something that could be considered. I would be something that this commission would want to retain as a special permit, but in the same way that you allow multiple unrelated people to occupy student housing, perhaps you could widen that to a special permit for, something like a single room occupancy, group, I don't want to say group home, but yeah, sort of a non healthcare group home.
So John, just as a follow-up, if we all agree Amy's suggestion is something that we want to incorporate into the regs, do you think, where would that fall? Under multifamily housing, or is that like
I think I would probably put that as a separate category, and
All right.
I would probably basically expand, and I'm shooting from the hip here, but I would say probably expand the definition of the student housing, which you guys have as a special permit category, and then you have special requirements and criteria for student housing as a special permit. I think I would, you could call it student housing or single room occupancy dwellings, and then just roll that into that same special permit criteria, so that if you're not a student, you can still live in a old house dorm type setting.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John. Any other input in the from the floor? Any community input?
Dave? Sorry, just one more question.
No, that's fine. This is, keep
Yeah.
asking.
John, your reference to the affordable housing equation percentages, is that like, assuming it's coming out of Hartford, is that like a suggestion? Is it a policy? Is it a regulation? How hard are they pushing this? And or what kind of flexibility might the town have in the whole formula?
Yeah, as of right now, the town can apply whatever formula it wants. I was just using the structure of a policy that the state put into place. It's about, 15 years ago. It's section 813 of the general statutes, which is called the incentive housing zone. That was a policy the state put in that was sort of, it was meant to be a compromise between traditional development and an 830G, affordable housing development that sort of gave a little something of incentives and density to the developer, along with an as of right process, and gave to the town, somewhat lower densities and more design control. So I'm just sort of borrowing that as a potential framework, but the town can do whatever it wants. There have been municipalities, I think, Mansfield, for instance, where you have an entirely different market atmosphere, right? You've got literally thousands of apartments going up there to serve basically overflow student housing needs. But demand there was so high. They had originally set a 10% affordability threshold on their multifamily development, but they also had a fee in lieu. So, similar to, fee in lieu of open space, you put it into a fund and buy open space somewhere else. This was a fee in lieu of affordable housing. The town would, build up a bank and, build some affordable housing somewhere. Those numbers, that minimum threshold was so low that developers were like saying, fine, sure, here, take the check. And so they kept ratcheting it up, making it more expensive because the market demand was there. If we hear from developers that, we set the number at 20% and developers can show us the math that says, listen, the delta between my market units and my affordable units is so great that I'm going to lose money and I can't build this thing. Well, then that's an opportunity for the town to reconsider. But if the tiny delta and you're allowing someone to build basically whatever density they want, as long as 20% of them is affordable, then Yahtzee for us, right? But the state is right now there are no targets or rules for if the town wants to put in some inclusionary requirement. There is no state guidance on what that percentage should be. It should reflect our market. If we have, like, if we take the cap off of multifamily, let people develop, and people are building multifamily all over the place, well, then that means demand is high. So let's make a high affordability threshold, right? If demand is low, then maybe we don't want to lean on developers too much to discourage them even more than the market is already discouraging them. So, but yeah, the state right now is very flexible about that.
Hey, do you have any citizens' comments on anything else we haven't discovered? Yes. Your state name, please.
Wendy Costa, just here on behalf of the Commission on Aging, to let the commission and the audience members know that we will be having our community conversation on the topic of housing on October 22nd. There'll be a session at 10 a.m. and a session at 7 p.m. We'll go over what the results were of the townwide survey that we did. From a housing perspective, I can tell you that roughly 90% of the people in Woodstock want to stay in Woodstock for as long as they can, and only 16% think that they are going to be able to do that because there's not appropriate housing. A lot of that conversation will be focused on what do they want. Is it a smaller a single level house? Is it a condo? Is it an apartment, whatever, something like that. So I just want everybody to be invited. There probably will be a separate invitation going out, should be all over Facebook and everything else sooner or later, but I wanted to give you advance notice that it'll be on October 22nd, right in this room here. 10 a.m. and 7 p.m.
Thank
or
you.
roughly an hour. What's next? Will it be Zoom?
These,
No.
you guys, this is a copy, it's a draft of the introduction to the plan of conservation development. I put it by every name tag if you wanna just take it and review. It's just that introduction section, you get a taste of kind of what we're working on with the P O C D. So I figured I would share it with you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Thank you.
And I also shared, kind of on the communications here, I shared the link that Amy sent from the NED, was that NED? No. The thing you went to.
ECOG?
The housing forum.
Housing forum. Everybody got that link in their email, or it's on the website too, that you said there was a lot of good information. I didn't have a chance to go over it.
Yeah, so the forum had two planners, a community agent, like an accents agent, and a attorney, a housing attorney. So if you do find that link, the first thing was the slide deck, so it kind of gives you the presentation, and then there's just a whole bunch of other links, a couple legal reviews, all housing related. Yeah, so.
And I don't think we have any other communications. Am I missing anything now?
No, there was, you guys were copied on, a letter of, complaint that a Woodstock citizen made to the Connecticut Siting Council.
Yes.
Concerning the cell tower up, I think 169. So that was just in communications. You were requested to be copied on it, so that's there.
Yeah, because there's something to do with a wetland, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And that's before the siting council, so that's.
Right, it's not a commission, it's not a matter of commission business, it's just an FYI.
I believe the council approves the cell phone tower.
Yeah, this is like the repeal of the.
Yeah, but they did approve them, I think, at that last meeting.
So does anybody know, what's the timeline on those? What's the improvement?
I don't know. It's a good question.
I was just curious. If nothing else. We have a
To adjourn?
second,
I'll second if no one else will.
all in favor?
Aye,
Any- Thank you, Dwight.
thank you.
Thanks, folks.